It was supposed to be just another quiet Saturday morning. I had my coffee in hand, planning to catch up on a few emails before heading out for inspections. But when I stepped outside, something didn't feel right. I looked down at the curb and froze. My address numbers, clearly painted just last month, were gone. Not faded, not scratched. They had been completely painted over with this ugly, mismatched gray that stood out like a sore thumb. I knew right away this wasn't some accident. Someone did this on purpose. Now, in most neighborhoods, this would be weird. But in an HOA-run community like mine, it wasn't just weird, it was a warning. And I already had a strong feeling who was behind it. Her name's Linda, but everyone around here calls her HOA Karen. You know, the type, clipboard in hand, peeking through windows, handing out violation notices like it's her full-time job. She's not officially part of the HOA board, but somehow she acts like she runs the entire street. The wild part? What she didn't know was that I'm not just a homeowner. I'm the actual county inspector for our area. So not only was she messing with my private property, but she was also breaking a few local codes in the process. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof, so I decided to play it cool. For now, what she didn't expect was that her little stunt would come back to bite her in ways she never imagined. I started putting the pieces together, talking to neighbors, checking my cameras, and quietly taking notes. But what I found out next, let's just say it didn't just involve my curb. And the more I uncovered, the deeper the rabbit hole went. All leading right back to Karen. You won't believe what happened when I confronted her. A few hours after I noticed the numbers were painted over, I walked down the street to see if anyone else's curb had been messed with. And guess what? Every other house had their numbers fully intact, bright, clear, and untouched. Mine was the only one singled out. That wasn't just a coincidence. It felt personal. And in this neighborhood, when something feels personal, it usually involves Karen. Now, I've lived here for 5 years, and in that time, I've had a handful of run-ins with her. Once, she left a note on my door about my trash bins being half an inch out of line. Another time, she rang my bell at 7 a.m. because my grass was slightly too tall. She's always hovering, always looking for something to complain about. But this was a new level. I started checking my security footage from the night before. Around 1:47 a.m., there was someone in a hoodie bending down at my curb. The video was a little grainy, but the posture, the quick glance around, the way they held the brush, something about it looked familiar. I couldn't say for sure it was Karen, but it had her energy all over it. That sneaky, self-righteous kind of attitude. Later that day, I casually brought it up with my next-door neighbor, Mike. He rolled his eyes and said, "Man, she's been going off lately. Last week, she told my wife our flower colors didn't match the approved seasonal." Palatini leaned in and said, "You know, she called a board meeting to push for repainting all curbs. Starting with yours." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just some random act. Karen had a plan, and I had just become her target. But what she didn't realize was that I had a plan too. And it had just begun. By Monday morning, things got even weirder. I received an official-looking letter in my mailbox with no stamp, just tucked in there like it had been hand-delivered. It was from the HOA, or at least it claimed to be. The letter said my curb numbers weren't in compliance with the community aesthetic and needed to be repainted immediately. Funny how that letter showed up right after my numbers got painted over in the middle of the night. I called the HOA office to confirm if it was real, and the receptionist sounded confused. She said no such notice had been issued. When I asked if a certain unofficial board member might have taken it upon herself to send it out, she laughed nervously and just said, "We've had a few complaints about her, but we can't really control what residents do off the record." That's when I knew Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was operating on her own rules, pushing boundaries like she was the law around here. And even worse, people were too tired or intimidated to call her out, but I wasn't like the others. I had the knowledge, the title, and now the motivation. Over the next few days, I started quietly documenting everything. I walked the neighborhood with my inspection gear, which wasn't suspicious to anyone because it's literally my job. While doing so, I noticed something odd. Karen had painted her own curb numbers with a gold metallic paint that absolutely violated HOA guidelines. Not only that, but she had installed a motion light facing the sidewalk, another rule break, especially since it spilled light into the neighbor's window. Meanwhile, a few neighbors started whispering. One told me Karen once threatened to fine them for a potted plant that didn't match the HOA's palette. Another said she tried to report them for a non-regulation bird feeder. The pattern was clear. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was targeting people she didn't like. And the more I uncovered, the more it felt like I was pulling a thread that would unravel something much bigger. That weekend, I decided it was time to push things a little further. I attended the monthly HOA meeting not as a homeowner, but in full county inspector mode. Clipboard, badge, the whole setup. I didn't want to make a scene, not yet. I just wanted to watch how Karen operated. In her element. And wow, she didn't disappoint. She was front and center, acting like she chaired the entire meeting, even though she had no actual title. She brought up curb numbers, yard decorations, and even tried to slip in a motion about mandatory mailbox repainting. It was clear she thrived on control. But when the actual board members hesitated, she got noticeably flustered, masking it with that forced smile she always wore. After the meeting, I hung back, talking with a couple of board members. I asked casual questions, nothing that would tip my hand. That's when one of them, an older gentleman named Dave, leaned in and quietly said, "Between you and me, she's been overstepping for a while now. But no one wants to challenge her. People are afraid of the drama." That confirmed what I already suspected. She was running a shadow HOA, fueled by intimidation and vague threats of violations. And now she had tried to erase my address on my own property as if that would make me back down. She clearly had no idea who she was dealing with. The final piece fell into place a few days later. I received a tip from a neighbor 2 streets over who said he caught Karen trying to remove a decorative flag from his yard at night. His security camera picked up her face clearly. He sent me the footage without hesitation. Same hoodie, same posture, same sneaky attitude. At this point, I had video evidence, eyewitness statements, and several documented code violations, law pointing straight at her. I was ready to make my move, but before I could, something happened that no one saw coming, and it changed everything. Just when I thought I had everything lined up to finally confront Karen and shut down her little curb painting empire, something strange happened. I got a call from the actual county code enforcement office. Not my department, but the regional office 1 town over. The guy on the line, a senior supervisor named Mitchell, asked me why a complaint had been filed against me. At first, I laughed, thinking it was a mix-up. But at WASN single quotes, according to the report, someone had accused me of abusing my title for personal retaliation, citing aggressive behavior and unauthorized inspections. I was stunned. Not only was the complaint anonymous, but it had detailed false claims about my work history and even listed photos heavily cropped screenshots taken from my own outdoor cameras, twisted to make it look like I was stalking neighbors. That's when it hit me. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she was trying to ruin my actual career. I spent the next few hours digging. Someone had created a burner email account and submitted the complaint through the official online form. But what gave it away was a single screenshot she used. It had a faint reflection in a window her phone case. The same sparkly leopard print case she flashes every time. she takes one of her pretend violation photos. It wasn't just a petty feud anymore. She had tried to weaponize the system I worked for. Not only was she interfering with county operations, but she was also filing false reports against an actual inspector, all while breaking multiple HOA rules herself. But she wasn't finished. The next morning, as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something new taped to my door. Another fake violation, this time claiming I had unregistered work equipment parked on my property. She was doubling down. And I realized she wasn't just trying to control the neighborhood. She was trying to erase anyone who stood in her way. What I discovered next made it clear Karen had been at this for years. And I was just scratching the surface. By the end of that week, I'd had enough. I gathered everything: video clips, screenshots, neighbor statements, even copies of her fake violation notices. I compiled a full report and scheduled a formal meeting with the HOA board. But I didn't go alone. I brought Mitchell, the supervisor who had called me earlier and who now fully understood Karen's scheme. Turns out, once he saw the real footage and timeline, he realized how serious this was. He wanted to witness what happened next for himself. The HOA meeting that night was packed. Word had gotten around, and neighbors were tired of staying quiet. Karen walked in like she always did, chin up, fake smile, acting like she owned the room. But the energy had shifted. People weren't just tolerating her anymore. They were watching her, and this time, they were ready to listen. I stepped up, introduced myself formally with my county badge, and calmly laid out everything. I showed side-by-side comparisons of her fake violations, played the footage of her painting over my curb, and even revealed the metadata linking her photos to the fake complaint against me. When I pointed to the reflection in the phone case clear as day, you could hear the entire room gasp. Karen's face dropped. She tried to interrupt, claiming it was taken out of context, but Mitchell stepped in and shut it down. He announced that she was being reported for filing a false government complaint and interfering with a public officer's duties. That alone could carry serious consequences. And from the HOA's end, she was being stripped of any informal influence, barred from issuing notices, and warned that future incidents would lead to legal action. As the meeting wrapped up and neighbors came to thank me, I felt that moment of calm, that satisfying end to a long, stressful ordeal. But just as I was leaving, an older man approached me outside. He looked nervous, glanced around, and said quietly, "You might have stopped Karen." But she wasn't working alone. Then he walked off without another word. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a painted curb. Something bigger was still hiding in plain sight. Over the next few days, that man's words stuck with me. She wasn't working alone. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. But after talking with a few more neighbors and checking into old HOA records, things started to make sense. Apparently, Karen had been closely connected with a former board member who quietly stepped down 2 years ago after some shady budget issues. Turns out he'd been feeding her info and backing her whenever she stirred up drama. He just kept a lower profile while she did the loud work. But with Karen exposed and officially cut off from the board, his grip faded too. The new HOA president took a stand and promised more transparency and accountability. The neighborhood finally started to feel like a community again, not some place ruled by fear and fake violations. As for me, I repainted my curb myself with regulation numbers and reflective paint, just the way the county prefers. Neighbors even came by to help, cracking jokes and offering coffee. Funny how one ridiculous act of painting over numbers brought everyone together. People who barely spoke before were now swapping stories and watching out for each other. Karen, meanwhile, has kept her distance. Her gold curb numbers were quietly painted over in standard white, and the motion light she installed was ordered to be removed. She still walks her dog with that forced smile. But it's clear the power trip is over. This whole thing reminded me that standing up calmly, with facts and patience, goes a long way. It's not about fighting fire with fire. Sometimes it's about shining a light, one curb at a time. So, if you're ever dealing with a Karen in your HOA, remember some rules are worth enforcing, especially when they protect your peace.